this video, the third in the series of How to Be Really Happy. In the first video, we saw happiness isn't something you get from the outside, the foreign holidays, the big house, the relationship car, or loads of money. No, happiness comes from the inside. We create it for ourselves. In the second video, we looked at what the well-being experts say you need to put in place to maintain maximum well-being. And of course, well-being is sort of like a prerequisite for happiness. Today, we'll quickly cover another of the basics, some needs theories of basic human needs and where they came from. And then we'll finish with a story. But there are lots of theories of human needs because where we are today is a result of hundreds of years of research and thought by eminent people who all wanted to answer fundamental questions like, what are we here for and how can we be happy? We'll be developing these ideas throughout the series, of course, but for now, let's have a quick look at the most well-known theory of human needs, Maslow's hierarchy or Maslow's pyramid. The assumption here is that we have our basic needs that must be met, and only when they are taken care of can we think about things like achieving happiness. And that makes sense, really, doesn't it? I'm sure we all have the experience of the late morning lesson at school or a meeting just before lunch where your tummy's rumbling and you can't think about anything except food. Abraham Maslow came up with Maslow's hierarchy of needs way back in 1943, and this is still the best known theory of human needs, regarded by many as the definitive one.
He suddenly saw that human beings could be said to have essentially 5 different kinds of need. On the one hand, the psychological, or what one could term, without any mysticism being meant by the word, the spiritual, and on the other, the material. For Maslow, we all start with a set of utterly non-negotiable and basic physiological needs for food, water, warmth, and rest. In addition, we have urgent safety needs for bodily security and protection from attack. But then we start to enter the spiritual domain. We need belongingness and love. We need friends and lovers. We need esteem and respect. And lastly, and most grandly, we are driven by what Maslow called, in a now legendary term, an urge for self-actualization, a vast, touchingly nebulous, and yet hugely apt concept involving what Maslow described as living according to one's full potential and becoming who we really are.
What Maslow's hierarchy highlights is something man has known about for centuries, but seems to have forgotten in modern times. Our material needs are only our very basic base needs, our grossest needs, if you like. Yet somehow we've been seduced by the American dream, bright lights and shiny objects, to think that physical things or material things are all that matters. And despite the ills plaguing our society, like the highest amount of illegal drugs ever being taken right now, stress, anxiety and depression, now the largest cause of illness around the world, suicide rates going through the roof, stress-related illness going through the roof as well, not to mention thousands of species becoming extinct every year through our ceaseless demand to consume more and more of the planet's resources, and even the very real possibility of our own extinction sometime in the next few decades. Despite all those things plaguing us as a direct result of our demand for material things, everyone still regards consistent economic growth as generally a very good thing. And economic growth is, of course, simply a synonym for demand and consumption of physical stuff or material stuff. So from an ethical standpoint, catering only to our material needs is damaging. Not only that, but if our ultimate goal is to be happy and fulfilled, it doesn't actually work. How do I know it doesn't work? Well, for a start, anyone addicted to drugs or alcohol can tell you that. Anyone who's committed suicide, including the many rich, famous and beautiful celebrities that have committed suicide or died from drug overdose, can tell you that. Anyone suffering from a midlife crisis where they've spent their whole lives working for the house, the car, the holidays, only to wake up one day feeling empty, any of those people can tell you that too. And I guess most importantly, thousands and thousands of works of wisdom ranging from spiritual texts like the Bhagavad Gita or the Tao Te Ching, right up to modern day writers like Benjamin Franklin or Eckhart Tolle. They can and do tell us that as well. So we see that material things don't make us happy. But we also learn from Abraham Maslow that the basic physical needs have to be taken care of first, so that we can move up the pyramid and concentrate on more elevated things. And I guess the purpose of the physical needs is to allow us to move up the pyramid. That's where the juice is. But in recent times we seem to be stuck in the bottom bits, especially in the last 150 years or so, since we found oil, which has made every material comfort and luxury available to us. And then we get stuck in the rat race, trying to pay for all those things we've bought and don't have any time to think outside that limited paradigm. But if the bottom rungs are our only focus, then we lose the happiness, satisfaction and fulfillment that we're all ultimately searching for. So how did this happen? I'd like to read you something which may provide a possible answer to that question. I'm going to give you a history lesson and a story, which is kind of partly an excerpt from the Celestine Prophecy by James Redfield. Have you read this book? It was a cult classic not long ago. In short, it's an adventure story about the search for a mysterious manuscript that goes missing, and that holds the answer to some profound mystery. On the back it says, "Passed from hand to hand, from friend to friend, since it first appeared in small bookshops across America. The Celestine Prophecy is a gripping and insightful adventure story that takes you on a quest to find an ancient Peruvian manuscript and the spiritual insights it holds." And the Telegraph said about it, "It hones in on the deepest, most urgent search of our time, the search for meaning." So, you may want to relax and get yourself comfortable and maybe close your eyes so you can really visualize the world that this is going to create. And it's a world that we all used to live in. So imagine yourself being alive in the year 1000, in what we've called the Middle Ages. The first thing you must understand is that the reality of this time is defined by the powerful churchmen of the Christian Church. Because of their position, these men hold huge influence over everyone's mind, and the world that these churchmen described as real is above all spiritual. Visualize this. You're born into the class of your father, essentially peasant or aristocrat, and you know you will always be confined to that class and to doing whatever work your father does. But regardless of which class you're in, you soon also realize that social position, which is everything, almost takes second place to the spiritual reality of life as defined by the churchmen of the day. You discover that life is about passing a spiritual test. The churchmen explain that God has placed mankind at the center of his universe for one solitary purpose: to win or lose salvation. And in this trial you must correctly choose between two opposing forces in order to win. What are the forces? The force of God and the force of the devil or evil. But you aren't qualified to determine your own place. You have to depend on the churchmen to interpret the scriptures for you and to tell you whether you are correctly following God or whether you are being duped by Satan. If you follow their instructions, you'll be blessed eternally and live forever in glorious heaven. But if you don't, then you'll go straight to the fires of hell and damnation. And you and everybody around you completely believe what they say. The world that we live in, the world that we take for granted, literally the world that exists for us, is a spiritual world only. This gives a great deal of certainty in life, as you can imagine. All the phenomena in life, from the chance thunderstorm or earthquake to the success of crops, the death of a loved one, and the chance of the plague coming and wiping out your whole family, is defined either as the will of God or the malice of the devil. There is no concept of weather or horticulture or disease, virus or bacteria. Everything is spiritual. There is no doubt or uncertainty about anything. We, the ordinary people, know very little about God or the Bible because we're not qualified. The Bible is in Latin and Greek. Even if we could read, we wouldn't be able to understand it. We just know what we're told by the churchmen. God is everything. The Pope is the link between God and mankind, and his priests are the only ones who know anything, so we just go by what they say and obey every word. Otherwise we're condemned to everlasting hell and damnation. And that means literally burning in the fires and misery of hell for the rest of time. So we sin or even think about sinning, we're damned. But we believe and pray, then we're safe forever. And that's pretty much it. Now, fast forward a little bit, and it's now 1400. And that reality is just beginning to break down. This worldview begins to fall apart in around the 14th and 15th centuries for various reasons. For example, the church people themselves violate their own vows of chastity, or they take bribes. Some of them get involved in politics and other things. Then suddenly you're in the midst of an outright rebellion. Martin Luther appears in around 1520, an Augustine monk and theology professor, saying the church is completely corrupt and you shouldn't believe a word you're told. He calls for a complete break from papal Christianity and then goes and translates the Bible into modern German. Besides which, new churches are being formed based on people accessing the scriptures for themselves without the middlemen. And as you watch in disbelief, the rebellion succeeds. This is huge. For centuries, the churchmen defined reality, and now, before your very eyes, they are losing their credibility. Suddenly, the whole world you thought you knew is being thrown into question. The clear consensus about the nature of the universe and our purpose here is collapsing, leaving you and all the other humans in Western culture in a very dangerous place indeed. Without that external direction, we're confused and lost. If the churchman's description of reality and the reason for human existence is wrong, then what is right? Imagine the impact of this collapse on the people of that day. It was a tremendous upheaval and incredibly unsettling. Do you know much about this time? Famous figures like Joan of Arc were there. She commanded the French army and won battles based on her spiritual visions and was burned at the stake for heresy aged 19. Copernicus and Galileo were also caught up in it, and they dared to propose the ridiculous notion of heliocentrism, which is the idea that the sun and not the earth was in fact the centre of the universe. Galileo was tried for heresy and spent the last part of his life under house arrest for it. The old worldview was being challenged everywhere. But by around 1600, astronomers have now proved beyond doubt that the sun and stars did not revolve around the earth, as the church said. In fact, the earth is only one small planet orbiting the sun with many others. So mankind has now lost his place in the centre of God's universe. What does that mean? Before, when somebody died or when the plant stopped growing, you could say God or Satan were responsible. But now all you can do is watch in anxious bafflement, because There is no rhyme or reason behind anything anymore. And that's the beginning of the modern age. So they thought, we need a way to make sense of the world. And then around the time of Descartes, they discovered a new way of finding things out called the scientific method, which simply means testing ideas and theories about how things work to see if they hold up. So we sent scientists off to explore the world around us and come back and then tell us what to believe. But because of the complexity of the world and the universe, they couldn't reach a definitive answer very quickly. So at this point, the book says, we began the preoccupation which has occupied us up till now. What's this preoccupation? Well, while we're waiting for the answer to our true spiritual situation, we decided we may as well settle in here and make ourselves comfortable physically. Makes sense, right? So that's what we did. Around 4 centuries ago, we shook off the scary feeling of being spiritually lost and diverted ourselves, temporarily, with conquering the earth and its resources. And we lost ourselves in that, creating economic and secular security to replace the spiritual security that we had lost. The real question of why we're alive and what's really going on here has been slowly pushed aside and finally repressed altogether. Maximizing our comfort and survival has come to feel complete as a reason to live in itself, and we've completely forgotten our original question: just what are we surviving for? So what's the answer to all this, and how does it help us in our quest for happiness? Stay tuned to find out. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe and click on the notification bell. Lead Yourself to Happiness is all about you achieving well-being and happiness. Check out leo.co.uk for more info. Take care and see you again soon.